everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren from A Menagerie of Stitches. Today is day 11 of the 12 days of mini Christmas amigurumi. I can't believe we only have one more after this. The past 10 days have been filled with extra cute minis. It's been so fun making all of these. We've made a hot cocoa, a snow globe, a drum, a Christmas pudding, Christmas lights, a Christmas tree, an angel, holly, a jingle bell, and Santa's hat. If you've missed any of these designs, all links will be provided in the description below and you can go back and check them out. Make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss tomorrow's video. If you'd prefer an ad-free PDF version of these patterns, you can purchase the downloadable PDF on my website, amenagerieofstitches.com. Before I reveal what we'll be making for today, let's go over the materials we'll be needing. You can also find the full material list in the description below. For today, I'm going to be using Hobbii Friends Cotton 8/4 and Rainbow 8/4. This is both a weight 1 or super fine yarn, and since they're identical, I'm using them within the same pattern. For Friends Cotton, we'll need Americano, which is color number 20, Oatmilk, color number 3, and Tomato, color number 40. For Rainbow Cotton, we're going to be using the color Brown, and that's color number 7. Because these projects are mini, you only need one skein of each color. This is a great stash busting project, so feel free to use whatever type of yarn you already have on hand. You'll also need a size B 2.25mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, a stitch marker, straight pins, embroidery floss and a needle, as well as 6mm safety eyes, and some fiber fill. Enough about the materials. Let's review what we're going to be making today. Today we have a cute little reindeer, the perfect companion to Santa. For this pattern, you'll need to know how to make a magic ring, single crochet, and invisible decrease. Video tutorials for how to do these techniques can also be found in the description below. Let's get started. We're going to start by making the head, and we're using the color Brown. To begin, with round 1, the pattern says to make 6 single crochets into a magic ring. So I'm just going to create my magic ring. Then I'm going to place 6 single crochets inside. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm going to pull that starting tail to close the hole. And now let's move on to round 2. Round 2 of the pattern says increase in each stitch around for 12 stitches. So I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each of these stitches until I have 12 total. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now I'm going to place my stitch marker in that last stitch. And if you need to, just give that starting tail another little pull to close that hole. And now let's move on to round 3. Round 3 of the pattern states single crochet 1, increase 6 times for 18 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the first stitch. Then in the following stitch, I'm going to make an increase. So that's 2 single crochets together. Now I'm going to repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. So 1, then an increase, 1, 2. And that's going to be the end of round 3. Let's move on to round 4. The pattern says single crochet 2, increase 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the next 2 spaces. Then in the following stitch, I'm going to make an increase. So 1, 2, and I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 4. Moving on to round 5, the pattern says single crochet 3, increase 6 times for a total of 30 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the next 3 spaces. So it's 2 and 3. Then in the following stitch, I'm going to make an increase. So I'm going to place 2 single crochets together. Now I'm going to repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 5. Now let's move on to rounds 6 through 11. The pattern says to single crochet 30. So for each of these rows, I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch for 30 stitches each time. So just put 1 single crochet into each of the stitches. And that's going to be the end of round 6. Now for rounds 7 through 11, I'm going to do the same exact thing, single crochet 30. Now at the end of round 6, you will see that the piece starts to curl in the wrong direction. To correct that, you're just going to place your fingers underneath and push that out. So that way the part facing you is going to be the right side of the work and you'll get a dome shape going in the correct direction. So I'm going to crochet rounds 7 through 11 and I'll meet you back here when I'm done. Now this is what it should look like after you've completed rounds 6 through 11. Now it's time to add the safety eyes. We're going to be placing them between rounds 9 and 10, placing them 7 stitches apart. So count from the magic ring, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Then I'm going to insert my hook in between those rows, oops, just to open up that stitch a little bit. And then I'm going to insert the safety eye. And now I'm going to count 7 stitches over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in the next stitch, that's where I'm going to insert the hook, open up that stitch, and then place the second safety eye. And now let's attach the backs. All right, now to move on to round 12, the pattern says single crochet 3, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the next 3 spaces. So that's 3. Then I'm going to make an invisible decrease, and that's going to be our repeat. So do that all the way until you hit the stitch marker. So it's 1, 2, and 3, then make an invisible decrease. And that's going to be the end of round 12. Now we're going to start adding fiber fill to the head. Make sure when you're stuffing to get behind the eyes. And you don't have to stuff all the way because we will continue as we close the piece. All right, now let's move on to round 13. The pattern says single crochet 2, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the next 2 spaces. So that's 2. Then I'm going to make an invisible decrease. And I'm going to do that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 13. Now I'm going to add a little bit more fiber fill to the head. And if you need to, you can use a chopstick or the back of your crochet hook to press the fiber fill into the head. I find that a chopstick works really well for this. Now let's move on to round 14. Round 14 of the pattern says single crochet 1, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 12 stitches. So you'll place 1 single crochet into the first stitch, then you're going to make an invisible decrease into the next 2 stitches, and you'll repeat that all the way around. So it's a single crochet 1, then invisible decrease. And do this all the way around until you hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 14. So now you can see that we are beginning to close the head. Now let's move on to round 15. Round 15 of the pattern says invisible decrease around 6 times for a total of 6 stitches. So I'm going to place an invisible decrease in each of the 2 stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Now at this point I am going to pause for just a moment and I'm going to add some remaining fiber fill to the head. All right, now let's finish making those invisible decreases. We left off on number 3, so I'm going to make 3 more. So that's number 4. And 5, and then this is going to be number 6. And now I'm just going to fasten off, so I don't need to leave a tail for sewing, so you don't need to leave it that long. Then you're going to take your crochet hook and pull that tail all the way through. Now with your yarn needle, we're going to close this hole that is open on the end. So you'll go into the front loop of the first stitch, and we'll do this for all 6 stitches that we have left. So going from the inside to the outside, you're going to insert your needle underneath that front loop. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm going to place my thumb here at the base and I'm going to give this a little pull and it's going to close that hole. Now we're going to insert our needle back into the very center of that hole, come out through one of the stitches on the side, pull this through, give it a little tug, and it'll close that piece really nicely. Then just secure this with a knot and then trim. And I like to use a smaller crochet hook to pull that tail inside, just like so. And that is going to be the head. Now we're going to move on to making the nose. We're going to be using this color called Oatmilk. To begin with round 1, the pattern says 5 single crochets into a magic ring. So I'm going to make my magic ring here. Then inside I'm going to place 5 single crochets. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I'm going to pull this starting tail to close the hole. And that's going to be round 1. Now let's move on to round 2. Round 2 of the pattern says increase in each stitch around for 10 stitches. So I'm going to increase in each of these 5 stitches until I have 10 in total. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 2. Now I'm just going to pull that starting tail again just to close that hole again. All right, now I'm going to place my stitch marker into the last stitch, and let's move on to round 3. Round 3 of the pattern says single crochet 1, increase 5 times for a total of 15 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the first stitch, then in the following stitch I'm going to make an increase by placing 2 stitches together. So that's 1, 2, and I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 3. Now I'm going to fasten this off and leave a tail for sewing. Then I'm just going to pull my hook all the way through to pull that yarn through. Then I'm going to make a clean fasten off. So with your yarn needle, you're just going to go underneath both loops of the second stitch. So this is going to be your first stitch here. You're going to go into the second stitch underneath both loops, insert the needle, and pull this through. And then I like to bring the yarn back to the front so it's out of the way. And you're going to go back into the last stitch we made underneath the back loop only. And you'll pull that through, and it's like we're making a fake stitch. So you can see that it basically looks just like what our other ones look like. Give it a little tug, and then that's going to be how you make an invisible fasten off. Now we're going to add the nose using this tomato colored yarn, and we're going to stitch the nose across the magic ring on the main nose piece. So I'm going to insert my needle up through next to the magic ring and pull this through. Then I'm going to insert it over onto the other side of the magic ring like so and pull this through. So you should just have a line right now. Now we're going to go into the same hole over here and in this hole as well, and we're just going to keep wrapping it around and around until it builds up the nose. So you're going to insert your needle back into that same area, pull through, and then you'll insert it back into that same spot on the other side. And I like to do this about 4 to 5 times, but you can do it however many times you want until your nose is a little bit puffed up. And that is going to be how you add the red nose. Now I'm just going to secure this with a knot. And then trim the tail down. And while you're here, you can also trim your tail that you did for that knot just a little bit, because we don't need that much extra yarn in the back there. And that's how you're going to add the nose. Now let's add the little smile. With black embroidery floss, I've already tied a knot on the end. And I like to place my smile off to the side, but you can definitely place it right underneath the nose. And if you're not sure how to make a smile, I do have a video tutorial here on my channel showing how to do it if you need a brush up. The link will be down in the description. So I'm going to insert my needle into the nose, back in, all right, and that is going to be how you make the little smile. Now I'm going to secure this with a knot. And then go ahead and trim these tails down. And while you're here, the starting tail, that is the smaller tail, not the one we're going to be using for sewing, the smaller one, you can go ahead and trim that down as well. A little bit longer than the other ones, but you can leave it however length that you'd like. Now let's attach the nose to the head. I'm going to place it in between the safety eyes, between round 7 through 12. So I'm going to count from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's where you want the top of the nose to start. I'm going to place a straight pin to hold it in place, and now I'm going to attach straight pins all around. And if the little tails start to pop out, just push them back in with the needle. So I'm going to apply some straight pins all around the circle, and this just helps keep it in place as I'm sewing it down. Now with our yarn needle, I'm going to insert it into the head to start, and I'm going to come out on the side with one of the stitch holes, pull that through. Now I'm going to insert it back into that same stitch hole, and this time I'm going to come up underneath one set of the V's. So that's going to be the stitches from round 3. You're going to insert the needle underneath, pull through, then I'm going to go back underneath that V stitch on the stitch before it, insert it into one of the stitch holes and pull it through. And that's how we're going to attach this nose. So it's just a back stitch all along the edge. So I'm going to go into the next stitch over on this side. You can remove a pin, pull it through. Now I'm going to go back this way. So every time you insert it, you're always going to go back the way that you were already at. So then I'm going to insert it underneath the V and come out one of the stitch holes on the side and pull it through. So you should see that we now have these little lines that are starting to form in between our normal rows of stitches and this V. So then I'm going to insert it back into the head, and in that underneath the V, pull it through, and now I'm going to go back over this V area right here, going back into that same area. Pull through, and just keep repeating this all the way around until it's all sewn down. So as you can see, a line is forming in between those V stitches on top and our normal row of stitches. All right, and now that you've sewn all the way around, we're just going to secure this with a knot. Then we're going to trim that, use a smaller crochet hook, and pull that tail inside. And that is how you're going to add the nose. Now let's make the ears. Now let's move on to making the ears. We're going to go back to using this brown colored yarn. For the ears, we're going to need to make 2 of these, so once you're done with the first one, just repeat this pattern for the second. To begin with round 1, the pattern says to make 4 single crochets into a magic ring. So I'm just going to make my magic ring, and I'm going to make 4 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm going to pull the tail to close the hole, and that's going to be round 1. Now let's move on to round 2. The pattern says increase in each stitch around for 8 stitches. So I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each of these 4 stitches. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 2. Now let's move on to rounds 3 and 4. The pattern says to single crochet 8. So I'm just going to make 8 single crochets for each of those 2 rounds. At this point, I'm not going to add a stitch marker just because it gets in the way while crocheting. So you will have to count and keep track of how many you've done. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that's going to be round 3. Now at round 3, you can see that the piece kind of wants to take shape. You will just want to use like the back of your crochet hook just to kind of urge that little peak to happen. Now let's move on to round 4. Round 4 is the same, so you'll make 8 single crochets into this round. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 4. Now I'm going to fasten off, and I'm going to leave a tail for sewing. I'm going to pull this all the way through. And now we don't need to stuff this, but I am going to cut this starting tail just a little bit And all the remainder that I have right here, I'm going to put inside of the ear. I like to use a chopstick for this, and I'm just going to push it inside. Make sure not to get your sewing tail in there as well. And now I'm going to make a clean fasten off on this. So with my yarn needle, I'm going to insert underneath both loops of the second stitch, pull it through. Then I'm going to go into the back loop only of the last stitch that we did and pull that through, and then give it a little tug, and that's going to be our fasten off. Now we're going to make one more of these, and I'll meet you back here. And here are the two ears. Now we're going to attach these to the head. Using straight pins, we're going to pin the ears between rounds 3 and 6. So what I like to do is take one of the straight pins, and counting from the magic ring, we're going to count 3 over. So 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to place my pin in there just to hold the place. Then I'm going to take the ear, and you're going to hold it up next to where that straight pin is. And then you're just going to take it out and then insert it right back in, attaching that ear into place. And then I just like to use a couple more just to secure it into place. Now let's do the same for the other side. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to insert the pin into that third row. Then take the second ear and place it into that third row, a second pin just to hold it into place. So at this point, before I start sewing, I want to make sure that these are even, and it looks like this right one is a little bit too close that direction. So I'm just going to pull it down a little bit and then adjust the top one and move that. And you can also hold it from the top and see if it's even with the eyes, if you like the positioning of it. Now let's sew them into place. With the yarn needle, you're going to insert the needle into the head. And at this point, to start, I like to insert it and push it through one of the stitch holes. This is not how I usually sew it in, but it just is helpful to get that first stitch started. Now I'm going to insert it back into that stitch hole, and we're going to go inside and pick up a stitch on the ear. And these are going to be the V, so the very last stitch of the round. Now I'm going to remove this pin, and you're going to insert the needle into the head. Then you're going to come up and through the ear and pull that through. It's basically like a whip stitch. So you go into the head and then you come out on the stitch on the ear. And just do this all the way around. And then once I'm done, I'm just going to insert it through a stitch hole on the side and pull through. And that is how you're going to secure and sew the ears into place. Now I'm going to make sure to tie a knot on this tail and trim the end. Use that smaller crochet hook to insert into the head and pull that knot through. Just like so. Now let's repeat for the other side. And that's what it's going to look like after you've attached both ears. Now let's move on and make the antlers. We're going to be using this color called Americano. For the antlers, they're made up of 2 pieces, a large piece and a small piece. For the large piece, we're going to start by making a magic ring, and we're going to be placing 6 single crochets inside. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're going to pull that tail to close the hole up. Moving on to rounds 2 through 7, the pattern says single crochet 6. So we'll place 1 single crochet into each of these stitches for those rounds. All right, so that was round 2. Now you can see that my piece is starting to curl in the opposite direction. For this specifically, you want to make sure that you either use the back of your crochet hook or a chopstick, and I'm going to correct that curl. So I'm just going to press into the bottom of that magic ring to start forming the tip of the antler. Now for this, I'm not going to use my stitch marker only because it's a little bit more tedious to have that in the way. So you'll just have to keep track of the rows that you're doing. Now after round 4, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to trim the starting tail because it's starting to get into the way now. So I'm just going to trim that just a little bit. Then using a chopstick or your crochet hook, just push it back down into the antler. Just like so. Now continue on with the rounds. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 7. Now I'm going to trim this tail and I'm going to leave enough length for sewing. And then I'm just going to pull this tail all the way through with my crochet hook, give it a little tighten. Now I'm going to make a little clean fasten off on here. So with my yarn needle, go into the second stitch underneath both loops, pull through, and then do the same underneath the back loop only of the last stitch and pull through. And that's how you're going to fasten off. And that's going to be our large piece of the antler. Now we're going to make the smaller piece. To make the small piece, we're basically going to be doing the same thing that we did for the large piece, except we're going to be shortening the amount of rows we do. So we're going to start with round 1, which says to make a magic ring with 6 single crochets inside. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm just going to pull that starting tail closed. Now let's move on to rounds 2 through 3. The pattern says for these 2 rounds that we're going to single crochet 6. So that just means I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each of these 6 stitches 2 times. So I'm going to go around for round 2, then round 3 will be the same exact thing. And just like with the large antler, after the second round, you're going to want to use your chopstick or a crochet hook and push that piece so that it starts to form the tip of the antler. So it should look like that once you've adjusted it. Now let's move on to round 3. We're going to place 1 single crochet into each of these 6 stitches, just like we did for round 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and our last one, 6. All right, now we're going to fasten this off, leave a tail for sewing, and with my hook, I'm just going to pull this tail all the way through. Now for the starting tail, you're going to want to trim it just a little bit. Use a chopstick or your crochet hook to place that tail inside of the piece. Now I'm going to make an invisible fasten off on this little piece. So repeat the steps of going underneath the both loops from the second stitch and then into the back loop only of the last stitch. and that's going to be the small piece. Now that you have the large piece and the small piece, we're going to attach them. I like to place mine about 3 to 5 rows down from the top of the large piece. Now I won't be using a straight pin to hold this in place, so I'll let you look to see how it's supposed to go at first. Just like that. Then I'm going to use the yarn needle and I'm going to sew it into place. So insert into the larger piece and pull through. Then you're going to go back into the small piece and pick up a loop along the edge. Now I do hold it where they're kind of sandwiched together, but that's just to hold it in place while I get the bearings started on sewing it. Because then after a while, you'll be able to hold that into place so it's sticking out like a Y. Then I'm going to just keep inserting into the larger antler and picking up one of those loops on the small antler. And just keep doing this all the way around. All right, and now once you've ended at the last stitch, I just like to weave it through one of the stitch holes on the main large piece or the large antler. And I'm going to make a knot, trim the end, and then use a smaller crochet hook and pull that knot through. So I like to go in from the bottom of the large antler and just go in and pick that knot through. Sometimes this can be tricky. There we go. All right, and then you can adjust, and that is how the antler is going to look. Now repeat the steps of making a large antler piece and a small antler piece, and then we'll attach them to the head. Now that you have both antlers made, let's attach them to the head. I like to place them between rounds 1 through 3 on the head. You'll place it right next to the ear, and you can use straight pins to hold it into place. So it should look like that. This will adjust once you get it sewn into place. It's just making its way that way for the time being. Then with the other antler, you're going to place it in the same space through the rounds 1 through 3, pin it into place, and now we're going to attach them to the head. With the yarn needle, to sew the antlers to the head, I like to remove one of the straight pins just so that it gets it out of the way. You're going to insert the needle into the head, and you can come out one of the stitch holes to start with and pull that through. Then you're going to insert it back into that stitch hole, and you're going to come up one of the loops along the edge of the antler. Just like so. Pull this through. Now we're just going to repeat that all the way around for the antler. So I'm going to remove the straight pin, then I'm going to insert my needle underneath those loops. And it's just like a whip stitch going back and forth underneath into the head and into the antler. So like so. And you'll do this all the way around until the antler is sewn into place. And then insert your needle back into the head on that last stitch and pull it through one of the stitch holes on the side. And then that's how it should be secured to the head. I'm going to secure this tail with a knot and hide the end inside the head. So use a smaller crochet hook to pull that knot inside, just like so. Now let's repeat for the other antler. And that is how you're going to attach the antlers. And here is our finished reindeer. This one is ready for a night of delivering presents with Santa. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a like and leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the final mini of the 12 days of mini Christmas amigurumi. I'll see you all back here tomorrow with a mini treat. Happy crocheting, friends!